Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com. Draft Mechanic, Episode 74.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of Dice Throne, Hive, Biblios, and Wonderland. We compare new coded clue-giving game Decrypto to juggernaut Codenames, and then we put Decrypto on tap. And we talk about the winners of the 2018 World Beer Cup. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take a mile. Know that all is for the best in the best of our world.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
It's a little something I can't quite put my finger on.
Perhaps something enigmatic?
A little decryption necessary, perhaps, to figure out what the meaning really is. We've got a few different kinds of games about finding meaning in things today with our variants feature of Decrypto and Codenames.
Well, I hope you're able to find the message you're looking for.
I'm sure we will find something interesting in the next hour and change. But
I
hey,
certainly hope so.
If this is your first episode of Draft Mechanic, thank you so much for joining us. And if you are a returning listener, super thanks to you as well. If you're looking for us on the internet, you can find us at draftmechanic.net and at draftmechanic on all of your typical social media feeds.
We also have a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470. You can check us out there. We'll have a thread up for this episode and every episode. Mm-hmm. And if you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we have meetups on the first Thursday and third Tuesday of every month. The next one is coming up this coming Tuesday, which is May 15th. We are going to be at Salud Cerveceria in the Noda neighborhood, so we'd love to have you come out, drink some delicious beers, play some fun games. It's a great space, too, so come on down.
Mm-hmm. And that is actually the day before we leave for Geekway to the West. I'm super excited to go to Geekway this year.
True fact.
And if you are listening to this in the first few days that it released, say hi. Shoot us a tweet on the Twitters at Draft Mechanic, obviously. And we are also kind of hosting an impromptu kind of field trip. We're going to go to Urban Chestnut Brewing Company at the Grove on Friday, kind of get there at 11 o'clock right when they open up, get a few tables. They've got huge tables. I've played games there a number of times, and they've got great beer and really good German food. So I think Mile High Game Guys and Brandon from What Did You Play This Week are also going to be coming along with us. And there's an event page up on the Facebook page, so you can clickety and, log on that you're going to do the thing.
I'm sorry, you can do what?
You can clickety and log on that you're going to do the thing. That is the technical term. I learned it from Zuckerberg.
Fair enough.
All right. But yeah, that would be super cool if you want to come hang out at that thing and drink some beer and eat some good food and play games.
Obviously.
Games. Danielle, games. It is time for our, I guess, almost every episode segment where we say something about what Asmodee is doing with their business.
What has Asmodee done?
This is actually kind of an interesting one, and I could not remember what episode we talked about this in, but a few episodes back we talked about how Asmodee's parent company, Eurozeo, apparently has plans of just basically growing companies at an alarming rate and then selling them off, and weirdly enough, rumors broke this week that apparently Eurozeo is looking for a valuation to either sell or do an IPO of, you guessed it, Asmodee.
That makes sense. They were never going to be a board gaming company. They're a company that just fosters other business.
Yes, but so the valuation that they're apparently seeking is 1.5 billion euros, which I don't have any kind of context for, but it seems like a very big number.
I mean, it makes sense. They just recently picked up the rights to Love Letter. They had previously picked up Catan, and I think they got all of Mayfair recently, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
So,
or at least anything anybody wanted. No, it was Lookout, and I guess kind of the Mayfair name or something.
So they have been acquiring things that are going to increase their perceived value because they brought a lot of income in the past. They haven't just been buying producers that are producing niche and appreciated games. They're buying stuff that is making a ton of money. So this is going to increase what they're valued at, obviously.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's obviously two ways this could go. There is the scary way of Asmodee gets sold to like Hasbro or something like that, or even to like a major media conglomeration like Fox, Time Warner, one of those kind of dealies. It's not impossible to think that that could happen. There's also the other potential thing that they might just aim for an IPO and actually offer stock in Asmodee, that in itself is kind of an interesting proposition to me, and I'm kind of wondering what that would have on that particular part of the industry. And I was reading up on Board Game Geek about this. W. Eric Martin kind of posted a Don't Worry article about this, and one thing he brought up that is very, very important to say is that, like, even if all of Asmodee's products disappeared off the shelf overnight, which won't happen and couldn't happen, there's still so many other things out there that people can play. I would obviously be sad to see, like, Space Cowboy stuff disappear, and I don't really see any reason for that stuff to happen, but it is very important to remember that Asmodee, while huge, is not everything.
I agree, but there's also something to be said for what exactly would be missing. Like I said, they've been targeting specific things, and if you got rid of everything Asmodee had, right now you would get rid of the entire Days of Wonderland.
Yeah.
Which is something that is very instrumental for a lot of people in getting them into the hobby, or getting their family members into the hobby. You'd also be missing everything that Fantasy Flight has, and for really big thematic gamers, that's a big segment of the market. So while it's obviously not the end of the gaming world if something bad were to happen to Asmodee, it is, worth considering what that would mean. Like, you wouldn't have Catan, you wouldn't have Love Letter, you wouldn't have a lot of those gateway games.
Ticket to Ride, Pandemic.
A lot of people would have to step in and produce something that was equivalent to that so that we would be at the same spot in growing the hobby.
Yeah.
Not saying that I think anything like that's going to happen, just to say, it's different to say this is a percentage of the entire market as opposed to what specific parts of the market does this cover.
Mm-hmm. The other side to think about on this is obviously if Asmodee gets purchased by like a Hasbro or a major media company, what does that mean to all those properties? I think if Asmodee does get purchased by like some major media conglomerate, all that means is more direct channels for board games to enter other forms of media. We talked, I guess, a while back about Asmodee Entertainment becoming a thing and they wanted to make movies, a Pandemic movie, a Dead of Winter movie. Those are kind of things that could be, I guess, in a pipeline more directly if they were purchased by some kind of a major media conglomerate.
The Walking Dead's already been made.
Well, hopefully they'd kill off Dead of Winter before it got too stale and people would, watch it.
Perhaps. But if Hasbro were to buy it, not obviously to stay away from something like Fox or, one of those major media in other forms, if it were to be bought by Hasbro, I am the part of me that is already worried about large companies owning smaller niche companies gets a little bristled and hair on end, obviously. But then you look at something like Wizards of the Coast, which has been owned by Hasbro for how many years?
A few of them. And
Magic the Gathering is still just a huge presence in the hobby gaming market, even as collectible card games in general are sort of not the most popular direction for new card games to take. I mean, a lot of newer games are going that living card game or expandable card game model where you're not necessarily buying boosters. Magic the Gathering is still like super strong. So it would, at least from the perspective of those games maintaining their position in the market, be good, but I don't know if it would be good for money to be going in that direction. I don't know. This is just me with my tinfoil hat over here.
I mean, all we can really do is kind of just make up ideas at this point because this article is very vague and all it says is that they're seeking evaluation, but nobody from any of those companies wishes to comment on it. What a surprise. But I hate to say it, but we've talked about this before and some things have come true, so who knows what we'll be talking about 2 episodes on Draft Mechanic on the News. I don't know. But one thing I do want to talk about in Draft Mechanic on the News is a new game announcement that I am kind of tickled by the announcement of.
Which is not owned by Asmodee in any way.
Very true. Stonemaier Games has announced their next game, and it is something that I think nobody really saw coming, but in retrospect makes perfect sense. What we are talking about is the announcement of My Little Scythe, which is a re-implementation that was originally a print-and-play of Jamie Stegmaier's game Scythe. This was designed by Hobie Chow, with art by Katie Cow and Noah Adelman. This is a fan-made print-and-play re-implementation of Scythe. Like I said, it was made by Hobie so he could play with his 6-year-old daughter. Now, the design... the original print-and-play design won a Golden Geek Award last year for the best print-and-play, and it's being made available with the typical production you expect from Stonemaier Games. It's got a pair of miniatures for each of the 7 factions. It's got custom games trays insert. It's got, a nice full color, really bright, fun color board, and it's interesting to see this kind of product be made available. It's something I never would have expected, but like I said, in retrospect, it makes sense that Jamie would want to jump on this and make this thing into a real thing.
What it does not have is the original theme of My Little Pony.
Very true.
Which is probably good for two reasons. One, I imagine getting the My Little Pony license is very, very expensive. And secondly, not everybody may want to play My Little Ponies. Also, My Little Ponies have gotten some weird lore around them lately. So they are moving to a generic, like, fun furry animals theme, which I'm all for. All kids like fun furry animals, as far as I can tell. I've not met one that doesn't.
I think the art is really adorable for this as well. Every faction has its own particular group of animals, and each player gets 2 of these animal seeker miniatures, is what they've called, which basically kind of fuse the mechs and the characters from Scythe into one thing. Also, each player has their own action board, like usual, but there's only 3 different action spaces. Basically, you have a, go look for things. You have a get pies to replace your fighting. You're having a pie fight.
I love pies.
And so you're going to do basically the same kind of mechanics, but in this kind of reworked theme, so it's applicable for all ages. How about that?
If you are looking for a little bit more in-depth and detailed run-through of this, fellow Punchboard Media members Tantrum House have a really great preview video up for this if you are looking to see a little bit more of how it plays, and they actually have children, which we do not, so you can see how it worked with their children and what their opinions are as parent gamers.
Yes, I'm very excited to hear how families enjoy playing this game. It looks like it will be releasing at Gen Con in August. Pre-orders were up very quickly, sold out. I guess not too surprising, but with it selling out in a few days on pre-orders, you can pretty much guarantee we're going to be seeing a second printing and probably a third or a fourth printing coming by the end of the year. So keep an eye out for that and look for My Little Scythe coming to, hopefully, Gen Con. Okay, so Kickstarters. We'll start off with our updates from last episode to kind of look back at those projects. Danielle, you want to do the first one?
Sure. First up, last episode we talked about the Piece of Cake expansion for Kitchen Rush, which we gave a full review of the base game back a couple episodes ago. This was, again, from Artipia Games, as the base game was, and it finished up at $82,000 of its $20,000 goal. They had almost 1,620 backers, and they earned 10 stretch goals, including upgraded components, additional cards, and a campaign play booklet. You can pledge late to this at the Kickstarter page, so if you are still interested in this Piece of Cake expansion, you can still get a chance to get in on this before they ship.
Second up, the Estates from Capstone Games finished at $75,000 of its $25,000 goal with 1,293 backers. They earned all of their stretch goals, and they were able to unlock the very last stretch goal. Capstone was able to kind of pull that one off at the last second, even though they didn't quite hit the money that they needed for it. But late pledges are also available for this one, and I gotta say, the production looks really sharp on this one. I think it's going to come off looking awesome. So if you like auction games and mean games and placement games, take a look at the Estates. You can still get in on that.
And finally, we talked about Blight Chronicles Agent Decker from Board and Dice last episode. This one is currently at $37,000 of its $20,000 goal, and it is still running. It is going through Thursday of this week, May 17th. So if you are listening to this right when it drops, you still have a couple of days to get in on this. They've earned 4 stretch goals already and unlocked character upgrades and cards for both agents. They have pledge levels that were reformatted since we talked about it. They are now at the $29 compact box, which is the smaller game board and only one agent, or the $45 core box plus, which is the full-size components and you get that second agent.
Yeah, I'm really glad that they reformatted those pledge levels. I think a lot of people were kind of concerned that it wouldn't fund so well with the higher price points that we knew or that we thought were going to happen when we talked about it on the last episode. But that $29 price point to get in and $45 if you want everything is a really good price point. I think that really did well for them overall and looks like a pretty good amount of funding coming in. Moving on to new projects, I wanted to start out with something that has just a very little bit of time left, but I'm kind of getting really interested in it, and I wanted to talk about it so that people can go and look at it if they have not. What I'm talking about is the Overlight RPG system coming from Renegade Game Studios. This is at 376% of its funding goal. It's $38,000 of the $10,000 goal. This will be ending at noon on Tuesday, May 15th, so tomorrow from episode release. The estimated delivery on this is August of 2018. You can back $50 to get the core source book. It's this really nice hardcover, fully illustrated book with art from Kwanchai Moria. They also have Gen Con and Essen pickup available, so you can back and not have to pay shipping on a book, which is really good because I'm sure it's going to be a heavy book. They also have some fancy pledge levels that you can back at like $340 for a full 5-person set. It's 5 books, dice sets for everybody. You get a GM screen, you get enamel pins, and then there's even a VIP backer level for a group to play with the creators at Origins or Gen Con. The Gen Con one was actually just snatched up in the last few days. Unsurprisingly, somebody wants to do that thing. That seems like it would be really cool. But anyway, this is Renegade's new RPG system in the world of Overlight, and just the brief synopsis of it is 7 continents hang in the sky, stacked vertically far above an unending sparkling sea. Shining down upon it all is the Overlight. So the continents that the world is built around, they have distinct cultures that each follow a certain virtue, and the heroes of the world are called Skyborn, and they're able to fracture the Overlight into 7 distinct colors, they call chroma, and manipulate that Overlight to produce remarkable results. So I've never been a huge RPG guy. I've played, just some little one-shots here and there, but something about Overlight has just really grabbed me. And I think it's this world. It's such an interesting and unique world of these basically floating continents in the middle of nothingness. And you can go on the Kickstarter site and look at, the background and all this stuff. They have a whole bunch of chapters available for you to kind of look at and get a feel for. But it's something that's so different in terms of a world rather than just like, we're adventurers on a world, or we're in spaceships in space, or things like that, that I'm so excited to see how this works, especially tied in with the completely, obviously, new mechanics and everything that this is founded on. It's apparently very storytelling heavy, but it does have a good number of dice rolling things as well, in that you have different dice that kind of deal with the different virtues, and you have different dice for skill checks, and it's just like, I'm so really interested in this thing. It's something that I have not seen before, and I want to know more about it.
The premise of it also seems like it would play really well into Quantai Moria's strengths as an artist. Like some of his really brightly colored but also very painterly works are some of his really absolutely most gorgeous works, and I'm interested to see how all of the illustration in this book comes through and takes advantage of that. You had also mentioned, I know, I'm not sure if you've mentioned it in this description so far, that they are looking to take this world and expand it into other games as well. Perhaps just more of a board game style thing, maybe different RPG installations. So this is sort of the beginning of the whole IP for them. So if you really want all of the lore that they're going to be playing in the space of, then this is the first spot that you can get that information.
Yeah, it looks super cool. I would love to see, obviously, board games come out of this as well someday, because that's the thing that I really enjoy. I know that they already have the second book of the Overlight RPG in process. They have a plan to put that out sometime in the next year or so. So they're planning on supporting this thing, from what I can tell, pretty heavily. And that's just really awesome and exciting. So I backed it, and I'm going to see about running a game of this, because it seems freaking awesome. So if that sounds interesting to you, run, don't walk, basically, to the Kickstarter page, though I'm sure you're going to be able to find this everywhere. There's like 1 or 2 Kickstarter exclusive things, so even if you don't get in on the Kickstarter and you miss out on the nice cloth bag and the extra, printed scenario, you're still probably going to have access to pretty much everything you want from Overlight, I guess, as early as Gen Con this year.
Next, we wanted to talk about Gravity Warfare from Smart Iguana Games. This is currently funding at $47,000 of its $25,000 goal, and the campaign is running through Sunday, May 27th. They're estimating delivery of this in December of this year, and the pledge level is $49. This is a balancing dexterity game with a heavy take-that card play to influence the ways that you have to place your pieces on a U-shaped balancing board. Pretty much on your turn, you're going to roll 2 dice that are going to let you know which of your pieces you need to place and what region of the balance board you're going to have to place them on. But other players can play cards to make your placement more difficult. Maybe you have to place with chopsticks, or you have to place after the board is spun. They've been working on this for a while. It's been in development. We saw it last year at Dice Tower Con in July of last year. So it's been testing for at least beyond a year, because it wasn't, it wasn't a rough prototype at that point. It was functioning and all that. So they've been working on this for a while, and if that sounds like your kind of thing, if you're into a dexterity game with a lot of take that, then this may be the one for you.
Yeah, an interesting dexterity game kind of always catches my eye, and when we saw this at Dice Tower Con, it definitely has a big table presence. It's not huge, but it stands, I guess, about a foot tall on the table, and then you got this U-shaped board that is kind of precariously perched on this center stand, and I just really, it looks cool, and I didn't get a chance to play it, obviously, but if you are interested interested in dexterity games, I think this one is something worth taking a look at because it looks like they've been playtesting it long enough that they've worked out a lot of the stuff. And one thing I really enjoyed reading that Kickstarter page is that they've taken into account a lot of feedback and changed a lot of things from earlier versions of the game to basically balance it out more and make it a little more efficient, more streamlined, rather than just kind of, barreling forward with their one vision of the way this thing has to be. This is pretty much a self-published first project for Smart Iguana Games, and it looks really sharp. I think it's going to at least be a good fun to play, so I would encourage you to at least take a look at Gravity Warfare. Finally, I've got Journal 29 Revelation. It's actually kind of interesting because we don't have any of your classic board games on the list this week, but Journal 29 Revelation is a self-published puzzle book. It's currently funded 234% of their funding goal is $22,000 of the $9,500 goal. This is ending on the morning of Friday, June 8th, 2018, with an estimated delivery of October later this year. So you can get the new book. This is actually the second in the series. You can get the new one for $19 before shipping, or you can get the first book plus the Revelation second book for $39. The first book looks like it's a little bit bigger, more pages, but this one looks like it's no slouch as well. So Journal 29 is a puzzle book, kind of if you think about as the Mike Selinker, I think it's the Book of Mazes or something like that.
I think it's called Maze of Games.
It's some of those combination of words, in which you are going to be going through from the front cover of this particular book. You're going to flip open the front cover and you're going to be presented with a puzzle. You have to solve the puzzle and then go on the affiliated website, enter the solution to the puzzle, and you get a key back from the website. And then that key you're going to write down in the book because you're going to use it in further puzzles throughout the game. So as you are working your way through one of these Journal 29s, you're unlocking more and more interesting stuff, and the keys that you get will help you with further puzzles. Now, this is all in service of the story from the first book carried into the second one, in which you are piecing together what happened to an expedition team that disappeared on the 29th week of whatever expedition they were on, and all that was left behind was their journals from week 29. Obviously, there you get the Journal 29.
I'm really excited to see another version of this sort of story-based puzzle book. While I did enjoy the idea of Maze of Games, and I almost picked up a copy of it, I wasn't super engrossed in the actual story. It was a story of some Victorian children that didn't really hook my attention for being out of print and how much it would have cost. But I'm kind of curious with this expedition and mystery, and I like the way that the actual keys that you're receiving aren't part of the book. So if you really wanted to, I assume that you could probably do all your writing in a separate notebook and run the book over and over again if you wanted to.
It does say that you might need to fold and bend pages, but that's kind of all it says on there.
Okay, but at a $19 before shipping price point, if you are interested in puzzles and sort of puzzles that are wrapped into a story that is, at this point, occurring over 2 whole books, if you wanted to get both of them, it would be the $40 price point you mentioned before, but that's a pretty good perspective price, I would think. I mean, I'm interested in this. I hope to see that it continues to exceed its funding goal.
Yeah. It's a puzzle wrapped up inside an enigma, wrapped up inside of a jelly donut.
Oh.
That's Journal 29 Revelation, and that is the end of Kickstarters. Not like forever, but for
just for now.
Just for this show.
For us.
They're never going to stop making Kickstarters, are they?
No.
All right, on to games. Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com. So 2 weeks ago for International Tabletop Day, we happened to be up in Asheville. Our friends at Burial Beer Company were having a beer festival. So after that, we went over to Asheville's board game cafe, Well Played. We've talked about it in the past. Really cool little game cafe where you can, get some games, have some craft beer, maybe get a nice grilled cheese sandwich if that's your jam. But we had an opportunity, obviously, to play some games because that's what they are there for. And the first one we played was Dice Throne. We're going to talk specifically about Season 1 of Dice Throne, not Season 2, which was just Kickstartered and not released yet, because it would be impossible for us to talk about playing the game that doesn't exist yet. So this came out this year, 2018, from Mind Boggling Games, and will be coming out from Roxley Games in the future. It plays 2 to 6 players in 20 to 40 minutes. It's designed by Nate Chatelier and Manny Tremblay, with art by Manny Tremblay as well. It's head-to-head Yahtzee style and dice, dueling with cards that level you up right good.
So, in Dice Throne, you are going to select one of the characters that is available, and they are each going to have special abilities that can be activated on your turn, and they're going to have a custom set of dice that goes with it. On your turn, you are going to roll your custom set of dice, and it's going to work sort of like a Yahtzee mechanic, where you're going to get to roll them up to 3 times and saving any dice you want from turn to turn. Once you have rolled them up to those 3 times, you are going to look at what you've rolled and compare them to the activation requirements for each of your abilities. You are then going to select one of your abilities that you've met that activation threshold for and do a certain amount of damage to the other player. That player, however, is going to get a chance to roll their dice and activate their defensive ability, maybe healing back some of the damage that you've done, maybe doing some additional damage to you, maybe putting a condition on you. At the beginning of your turn, you're also going to be refilling your hand with cards, and each character has a separate and unique deck. There's going to be cards that upgrade the abilities on your board. There'll be level 2 and level 3 abilities for the attacks that are on your board and your defensive abilities, so that as you play the game, you are able to get stronger and do more damage. But there are also cards that are instants that are maybe going to mitigate something that has happened either in the dice rolling phase, or there are cards that you can play at any time that allow you to maybe reduce the amount of damage you've done, or reduce the amount of damage you've taken, or do additional damage on your own part. Maybe force your opponent to re-roll some dice so they don't meet an activation ability. You're going to keep going until one player has lost all of their hit points, and they come with these cool little hit point tracker dials that you're able to count down when you take damage. Whoever is the person left alive at the end of the game is the winner.
Yay, winners.
Being alive.
Hooray. I had a good time with this game, and I think that was pretty clear at the time because we opted to just play it again, and we actually played 2 games back-to-back of this when we were at Well Played. But looking back on it a few weeks later, I'm not craving to pull it out right now, and I don't think that's any fault of the game. I just feel like it's in an interesting space between light games that are dice games and heavier games that are combat games. Like, I was thinking about this as I was kind of just putting a show notes together, and I really kind of equated it with Ashes, Rise of the Phoenixborn in a way, in that it is a dueling game that does something fun with dice. Now, obviously, the similarities end there. Ashes has a lot heavier dice management, where the dice becoming your mana, and obviously the battling and all the card interplay in Ashes is the focus of the game, rather than kind of the Yahtzee and the press your luck kind of fun of Dice Throne. But I guess, that's just where my head is at right now. But I will say, the thing that I really like about Dice Throne in terms of ease of play is that all of the decks are already made and you just grab a tray and go, especially after you've played this a while. And I can see why this already has a season 2 on the way, because it's so easy to just be like, all right, I'm going to grab this one and this one, and we're going to just go for it. And I feel like that quick fun play is what the real strength of this game is.
Yeah, we were able to pick this up and read through the rulebook in less than 15 minutes and get a game going. Mm-hmm. And I think the strength of this game is that you can pull it out with almost anyone, and that it's got familiar mechanics to a lot of things that people might understand if they're not particularly strong gamers. Like, if you have somebody who's played Yahtzee a whole bunch of times and you want to introduce them to this kind of dueling game, the mechanic will make sense. Okay, I roll these dice and I'm trying to get these specific categories that are laid out for me on a sheet in front of me, which is essentially what Yahtzee is. You're looking at your sheet going, I need this or this.
Yeah.
Here, you're able to just say, hey, take your dice, roll them, try to get this stuff, and then you do this damage. And there are those conditions that I mentioned in the overview, which are going to add a little bit of complexity there. And there is the decision for, do I save my money for cards that I want to use to upgrade later? Because the upgrades are usually a little bit more expensive than the instant ability cards. But sometimes those cards make the decision for you. If you've already upgraded your ability to a level 3, you don't need that level 2 ability anymore. You're not going to downgrade it, pay more money to have a less powerful ability. That makes no sense. So you can just discard that and get some additional money to spend later. It's a really simple game, and I have a feeling it would be a great spot to start somebody on this kind of maybe back and forth dueling type of game. I also like the fact that you have a chance to defend against an attack. Yeah. If somebody has a really good roll against you and they do a huge amount of damage, and there is an ability, if you roll all 6s on all of your dice, or whatever the strong side, they are labeled 6. If you roll all 6s, you get this super powerful version of your ability. And that happens for everybody. Everybody has that option. But even then, if you have a really strong ability against you, you get a chance to mitigate that. And that makes me feel like I'm not super hosed just because you did well. And it will take away, I have a feeling, a lot of the anger that somebody who's really competitive or isn't really used to these fighting games where, if they feel attacked because you had a good roll, I have a feeling that ability to defend is going to mitigate a lot of those feelings.
I agree completely with that. I love the way the mitigation works, and I think it's really fun, especially, if you know the different heroes very well, you can kind of pick, okay, well, if you're going to play that one, I kind of want to play this because they play against each other really well. I did, however, find myself kind of shrugging my shoulders at the way the cards came out. We have this deck of maybe 30 or so cards, and in a game, I'm probably only going to see about half of that, which means that if I'm hoping for one of my level 3 upgrades, there's a good chance it might not even come out. And I think that was kind of a frustrating moment for me in a way, because I had a game where in my very first hand, I had one of my level 3s come out. It was the first thing I bought, and then I was lucky and rolled it on my second turn. I was a little frustrated that, I got to that point so quickly. I would have loved to see, and I don't know if this is something that they're going to mitigate in Season 2 or change in Season 2, that you have an option to buy into those upgrades rather than waiting for them to come around before you buy them up, because, if you get a bad shuffle on your cards and they're all at the bottom of your deck, you might never get one of those really good abilities.
You do have the ability to discard your cards for money, though.
True. So you can cycle through.
Yeah, if you got a bunch of cards that you don't think you're going to be able to use, or you just really want to get to those powerful upgrades, you could just discard things for money, and then you'd have more money to buy them when you got them.
Mm-hmm. I do kind of, in a way, I feel bad because I feel like I'm bringing up all the parts that were negatives about this. I did really enjoy playing the game, and I would probably not ever turn down a game of it, but I would it's not the kind of thing that I need to have in my collection, per se.
I certainly agree with you that we don't need to have it. It is a fun game, and I think it works really well at a place like Well Played, where you have people coming in and they need to be able to learn something quickly and play a simple, fun game. And this is certainly that. It is simple and fun and easy to learn. But it's not really doing anything exciting for me that I can't find in other games with a little bit more of an interesting twist. I think it is very well done for what it is, but it's not essential.
What I will say is that I do want to keep my eye on Season 2, and I want to see what kind of chances and risks they take with the Season 2 characters and the cards therein. Hopefully bring some new exciting mechanics, because I do feel like the foundation is good. It's a good foundation. It's easy to learn and quick to play. And if it does get a good, few years of support from Roxley, which seems like the company that would do that, if we get a few different seasons of Dice Throne coming out, it's possible that this game will expand and will be something that I want to seek out more in the future. So at the very least, I'm going to keep my eyes on it, and I do want to see what that Season 2 does to it. But that's kind of where I'm standing at on Dice Throne.
Next up, we have Hive, which is a 2001 game from Gen 42 Games and plays 2 players in about 20 minutes. The designer and artist is John Yanni, and this is a 2-player abstract game about moving around each other and bugs. So many bugs. Ugh, bugs.
So Hive is one of those games that's always talked about as, the classic 2-player abstract of modern era kind of category. And after playing it, I can definitely give it that moniker of a classic 2-player game in the abstract category. We'll refer back to that in a second. But basically, in a game of Hive, each player has a set of these very nice clay hex tiles that each have a different kind of bug on them. One player is white, one player is black, and the game revolves around you placing tiles down and then using the different movement rules of the different bugs to eventually surround the other player's queen bug on all sides. All of the tiles have to always be touching. You can't ever make a move that splits the hive into multiple sections, and depending on which kind of bug you're talking about, for the most part, they're only going to be moving on the one plane. There is one bug, a beetle, that is able to climb up on top of the stack, on top of the hive, and kind of move around and block things from existing for a turn. But it's basically a movement and capture kind of style game. It is very quick and easy to learn and very quick and easy to play. And I guess 17 years ago, it was super, super exciting, but I honestly found it, I feel like I've moved on from Hive in general. I didn't find it super exciting. And I guess that's kind of what you get for going back and looking at some games that were the first in their space.
I'm not even sure it's a time issue, though. If you really like an abstract game which is very tactical and which is very much about mastering play with the same pieces over and over again, if you like chess, or if you like any kind of really 2-player abstract game where the object is to play it enough times that you know all the best ways to do it, this is a fine game. This is not my kind of game, so I'm certainly not going to be seeking it out. But I have a feeling if what you want is a game that you can play over and over and over again with probably one other person so that you can both get that level of mastery on the game, this has enough interesting ideas that I don't see it being a bad choice if that's what you want. That's certainly not what I want, and I don't think it's the kind of thing that we would play ever enough to get that level of mastery. I also, in this game that we played, I knew about a third of the way through that I had lost the game. I made an error that I could not recover from. I was going to end up with like 3 fewer pieces than you to adjust at the end of the game because I had moved, or I had placed pieces that I couldn't move. I would immediately lose the game if I moved. And I knew I had lost the game at that point, but we still had a bunch of the game to go, and I wanted to see how it played, if maybe there was something that was going to change. Obviously, the rules weren't going to change, or if maybe an opportunity was going to open up and I was going to be able to do something about it. And it didn't. So this is also the kind of game where if you make a mistake, you're stuck with that mistake for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and it was honestly, our game ended up in a stalemate for the most part, just because we both realized that I'm not going to move my pieces because I'm in a perfect place to catch you if you have to move one of your pieces, and it just kind of was there.
Well, I mean, then you get to the point where somebody needs to move their piece because they can no longer place a piece because you have a certain number of pieces, and the first person who has to move is the person who loses the game, which is fine. I mean, that's a perfectly valid type of game. It's not something that really excites me.
And I know that this game has had a lot of further expansion, different kind of bug tiles getting in there, but I have a hard time, as I am the abstract fan of the two of us.
That is true.
And I have a hard time recommending this when I know a game like Santorini exists, which is a very similar kind of abstract move and block kind of game, but everything about Santorini is more exciting to me. I feel the powers are more exciting. I feel the production is way better. I feel like it's a lot quicker to teach and a lot faster to play.
Well, yeah, but there is also the flip side that you can take Hive and throw it, like, there's literally a pocket version of Hive.
True.
You can throw it in the console of your car and put it on a picnic table. You can put it on a beach blanket. You can put it anywhere you want. Like, it is a significantly more portable abstract game than something like Santorini. So if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for something that can be like your family game, that you always bring this with you and you play it when you're waiting in line, or you play it when you're out to dinner or something. I feel like this is a good option because it is so compact and all the pieces are water resistant and there's no additional scoring or additional chits. You've just got these Bakelite hexes, and that's the whole game. That if you're looking for a portable game, that is a real benefit for this game.
Okay. I think that is exactly the space that I would recommend Hive for. So, the final game we had a chance to play at Well Played is actually something we've had on our shelf for a while, and you've played a few times, but I finally had a chance to play Biblios. And this is a game that is a 2007 release from Dr. Finn's Games and also published by Yellow. It's 2 to 4 players in about 30 minutes, designed by Steve Finn with art by Steve Finn and David Palumbo. It's a card drafting and auction game about collecting books.
It is. You are monks that are trying to build up the library of your monastery, and you need money to do so, and you need books to do so. We've actually talked about this game a number of times in reference to other games. The one that particularly jumps to mind is Favelas, that we talked, or at least I talked about, because I had played it at the time, talked about being a sort of lesser implementation of something that works really well in Biblios. I think also For Sale does a lot of the things that are done in Biblios. And I like Biblios. I'm going to spoil my opinion of this already. I like Biblios better than both of those games.
Okay.
So in Biblios, like I said, you are monks that are trying to build up the library of their monastery. And what you're going to do is you're going to start with a deck of cards that has cards of a number of suits, 5 different suits throughout the game, and also has money shuffled in, and also has some cards that give you the ability to change the value of each of the suits. You are going to start at the beginning with a board that has a die for each of the 5 suits, and they're all going to start at 3. So all the suits at the beginning are worth 3 points at the end of the game. You are, throughout the game, going to be able to increase or decrease the value of each suit within the bounds of that D6. So it can never be more than 6. It can never be less than 1. But you are going to be able to have opportunity to increase and decrease the value of those suits. And at the end of the game, whoever has the majority of points in a specific suit is going to get as many points as there are pips showing on the die towards their final score. Now, you're going to do this through 2 phases. The first phase, you're going to be collecting cards. So on your turn, you are going to flip up the number of players plus 1 in cards one at a time. So if you've played Herbaceous, this is going to be really familiar. So you're going to pick up the first card, decide whether you'd like to keep it for yourself, you'd like to place it out into the center for the other players to choose at the end of your turn, or you'd like to donate it to the auction pile. Once you have flipped up a card for every player, you will have kept one. One will have been placed in the auction pile, and the others will have been placed out into the center of the table. The other players are going to get a chance to select from the center of the table and take those cards into their personal hand. Then the play is going to move to the next player, and you're going to go through until all of the cards in that original deck have been dealt out. So everybody's going to be getting one card per turn, and the auction pile will be getting one. Once all the cards have been distributed, you're going to take that auction pile and you're going to shuffle it up, and you're going to start auctioning off the cards. If a card that is flipped up is of one of the 5 suits, you're going to need to pay for it with money cards from your hand. If a card that is flipped up is a money card, you're going to need to make your auction in the number of cards from your hand you are willing to discard. They may be money, they may be cards of other suits, they may be cards of that suit. Once you have auctioned off all of the cards, like I said, you are going to count up however many points everybody has in each of the 5 suits, and whoever has the highest value in each of the suits is going to get the points for that suit. The person with the most points from suits at the end of the game will win.
Books.
Indeed, books.
I am actually kind of happy that I played this after the games that it influenced, like we talked about Herbaceous and Favalas and those kind of games, because it was interesting in a way to see at least not the first game ever, of course, with some of these things, but the game that kind of, I feel like, popularized a lot of these things, specifically the dice as points and the modification there, plus the Steve Finn card drafting that pops up in a number of his games. It was really exciting to see where all of those things came together, and I found myself really enjoying Biblios. I'm sad that, honestly, in a way that I haven't had a chance to play this game yet, but I guess that's kind of the fun of a tabletop days, that you kind of just go and look at the shelves and you're just like, well, we haven't done that one yet, let's do that. So it was awesome to get back in there and see that. I would like to play with more players. I only got a chance to play the 2-player game with you, and I assume that when you have 3 or 4 players, you have a lot more interesting interactions with what cards are left up on the table, and hopefully more manipulation of the dice as different players are jockeying for the same position.
Yeah, the auction phase is certainly a lot better with more players. I like this a lot with 3 or 4 players, but it is, even at 2, like, it's not fabulous at 2. It is certainly better with a few more players, but even at 2, I think it's a good game, and it's better than Favalas was, which was the other game with this sort of, you need to win the whole suit to get the dice points. I think it's also really interesting with more players because you need to pay attention to who is taking what. It's not only what am I wanting to keep, what am I going to want to put in auction to maybe get later, and what am I just not needing so I can discard to the center of the table, because you need to pay attention to who is going to get the pick of the cards. The player to your left is always going to get first pick of whatever cards are placed out into the center. In a 2-player game, there's only going to be 1 card placed out there. But in a 4-player game, there's going to be 3 cards there, and if you know the player to your right is collecting one of the suits that you've drawn, you may not want to put it into the middle because they may be more aided by getting that card than you are by taking it or maybe putting it into the auction pile to get later to plan on making them pay more money for it, or maybe they will have changed what they're collecting by that point.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I hadn't even thought about the added layer of strategy that comes from seeing all 3 cards in a 4-player game and seeing who takes what.
Certainly. The other neat thing about this is the way that you pay for those auction cards, because you need to have a nice mix at the beginning of the auction phase of money and the cards that you're collecting. You are taking things in that first phase that maybe you don't necessarily need, but you don't want other people to have, just to be able to discard them to get money cards later in the game so that you can make a really strong bid for the cards that you definitely need, so that you can get that, 4 of blue that's going to put you over the top and get all of those blue points. We didn't talk about so much in the overview. I mentioned them briefly, but there are also these church cards, which allow you to increase or decrease 1 or 2 die, depending on what's pictured on the specific card, to make a suit more or less valuable. And those always happen immediately. They're the only thing in the game that happens immediately. They are, when you flip them up, whether it's in the first round or if they are taken and put into the auction pile, you can say they don't immediately happen, but when they come up in the auction, they will happen. They allow you to make something appear more desirable than it may end up being, because say you know that there are a couple of those church cards in the auction pile. you can inflate a suit at the beginning of the dealing round where you are collecting cards, and then bid on those cards that allow you to deflate that suit later on, hoping that other players have invested heavily in the points for that suit, and then they'll receive fewer points, and whereas you may have been going for a completely different suit that either doesn't get changed or you can bump up later in the game.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I am looking forward to another play of Biblios.
Our final game that we wanted to talk about is Wonderland, which is a 2018 release from Renegade Game Studios that actually came out on International Tabletop Day, so it came out the day that we played those other 3 games that we just talked about. This is a 2-player only game that plays in 15 to 30 minutes. The designer is Daniel Solis and the artist is Beth Sobel, so you know it's absolutely going to be gorgeous. This is a game of card placement and interaction and a little bit of area control.
So Wonderland is a quick little 2-player game that takes place in the world of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Adventures in Wonderland. Did I get that right? Alice's Adventures in Wonderland?
There you go.
Yes, nailed it. So one player will be playing Alice and the other player is the Red Queen. Each player has a hand of cards that is numbered 1 through 7, and that's it. Basically, it's a very small card game, and you are going to take turns playing your cards out in front of you in kind of what will eventually look like an Excel spreadsheet, which the game is more interesting than an Excel spreadsheet, but it's a good reference. So the Red Queen, for example, is going to be placing 3 cards out in front of them at would be the A, B, and C column header rows, and then the Alice player will be playing on the 1, 2, and 3 row header sections as well, and then from there you're going to place each of the other 4 players' cards in that 3x3 grid that it creates there. Now, at the end of the game, your goal is to have the highest value in a row or a column, so you get the points of whatever the header card of that particular row or column is. So if I had my 4 face down and I ended up winning that, I would get that 4 card and it would give me 4 points. The twist on this is that some of your cards have either a potion or a cake on 1 or 2 of the sides of that card. And whatever is on the other side of that potion or cake, the value of that card will be affected. Cakes double the adjacent card, and potions take effect less, and they zero out any adjacent card adjacent to that potion. So you could, in a way, put your 7, for example, in a nice space. The 7 doesn't have any extra bonuses on it because it's a 7, and 7 is a very big number. And you have it next to 2 cakes that doubles it to a 14 and then a 28, and you're like, this is obviously going to win. And then somebody puts a potion down and zeroes out your 7, and it's just a 0. And then they end up winning because that was a 1, and somehow that was the best card in the row. I don't know. I didn't really plan this example out much further than that. But the game plays in roughly the amount of time it took for me to explain this. So you can play a few games and trade your hands back and forth. One player is Alice, and then the next turn they're the Red Queen, and then you have a rubber match, and whoever wins that one wins that one. The other thing in the box there's a set of 4 cards, because if you were paying attention and doing the math in your head, a 3x3 grid has 9 spaces instead of 8. And then the Alice player at the very end will choose one of these 4 special cards that will then interact in a fun and interesting way with the rest of the cards. Maybe it'll swap the header cards of the row and column that card is in. Maybe it'll mean that this particular column is lowest number wins, or this one will double the highest card in that particular row. But you will go back and forth like that until you have won a bunch of games and decided whoever is the winner of Wonderland.
This game is fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. It works. There is certainly some interesting thoughts to be had when you are looking at what is out on the board, because your access cards are all face down, so you don't know which rows and columns are going to be worth what amount of points, and you also don't know at the beginning of the game what cards your opponent is holding in their hand. Because they've had to take 3 of their cards and discard them to make the points for the row or column, you're going to start with a different 4 cards than the other player, possibly. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you started with the same 4 cards, and everybody has the same chance of rows and column points. But beyond that, I feel like there is sort of a disadvantage every time you play a card. Every time I do something in this game, I feel like I don't want to do it. And that's not a great feeling to have had, because when you play a card, you are giving opportunities to the other player, and really, you don't know if you're gaining anything for yourself. Because you could play a card of a high value that doesn't have any of the potions or cakes on it, and lay it out there and give yourself a good chance to win a row or column, but it's entirely possible that somebody just plays a 4 next to it and cancels it completely. That card is gone, and you've essentially wasted a valuable card by playing it before that person had a chance to react to it.
I think the game plays so quickly that you can't really get to the point where you're developing any really good strategy as well. I did, in like the fifth game that I played, I did get to a point where I had 2 cards left in my hand, and I was like, ooh, this is an interesting strategic decision. And then I thought about it, and it was the first time that I had really had that thought, and I think that's just because there's so few actions in the game that it's going to be a quick and fast-playing game like this. It could very well be the kind of thing that 15, 20 games down the line, maybe you're starting to really get a feeling for where the cards have their potions and their cakes, and you know, okay, well, if this player played this thing here, then they might have this in their hand still. I've got to make this cool decision, but, like, I don't need to do that. I don't have a desire to play this game another 20 times right in a row to get a feel for where everything is and really get to the point where every card is a strategic decision. But if I want to have a quick 5-10 minute playing game, I think honestly the 15 to 30 thing is not even remotely close. It is a 5-minute game. I mean, yeah, if I had it, I'd play it for 5 minutes because you're not losing a whole lot of time on it too.
Yeah, I think this is a game that, again, is going to benefit from a meta. When you play with somebody a lot of times and you understand, okay, that person is more likely to put their valuable cards in the axis so they can get a bunch of points at the end of that game. Or if that person put a strong card in the axis, they're likely to hold back their potion cards to be able to cancel out something that is in that row or column so that they can have an opportunity to win those large amount of points. Or, you know, once you have an idea of how the other person plays, because there is a sort of consistency to the way you're going to make those decisions, you will have maybe a more informed decision to make. But since there are so few cards that you're going to play in this game, each game you're only going to really... I mean, even if you count the Axis cards, you're only going to make 7 plays in the whole game. Mm-hmm. But 3 of them are placing those Axis cards, and then you're going to have 4 grid plays during the game. It is a little bit quick and simple for me to want to play enough times to attend to that meta.
Yeah.
I think the expansion, however, is not fine. I think because Alice gets that last opportunity to play any one of the 4 very powerful cards, the Alice player would have to make some really, really poor decisions to not be able to win if playing with the expansion cards. Mm-hmm. You have the ability to make a row and column won by the lowest value, so essentially to flip-flop the winner in a 2-player game. You have the ability to swap the amount of points that are placed in the row and column. So if you know you put something really valuable in a row or column that might be won by another player, you can switch it if you're going to win the row and it was maybe in the column. There's one that allows you to double the value of the strongest card in a row, including the points. So if you have won a really high value row, you can just double that, so you're getting a huge amount of points.
I did, in one of our games, double the 7, which is 14 points on one card, which is higher than most scores I've had in this game.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that at the end of the game, without having to decide before the game is actually played, Alice can play one of those 4 really, really powerful cards, I think really takes all of the strategic decisions you're making during the game and almost invalidates them. Mm-hmm. I would not play this necessarily with the expansion ever again. I mean, they're gorgeous cards, but I don't need that in this game. I think this is one instance where a micro game could use fewer cards, just 4 fewer.
Yep. Well, that is Wonderland. Before we move on, I just remembered I have a 5th thing that I want to talk about, and I'm going to talk about it for 30 seconds. The Among the Stars app has come out for iOS and Android, and oh boy, am I happy and excited because it is super slick. It's a lot of fun. It's got online cross-platform play for iOS and Android, and it's got a campaign mode, and I'm playing it, and
yeah, I don't believe you didn't think to put this in the notes. Wow.
Well, to be honest, I want to play the campaign more before I talk about it because I'm interested to see what they do. I'm only 2.5 games through the campaign. But yes, Among the Stars is out. Please come play Among the Stars with me.
Now, I was watching you play this. You had thrown this up on the TV, and I was watching you play in the living room the other day. And I do really think this is a really smooth and slick app. But I do, having watched you play it, think, at least for me, that this is a game that I would play because I couldn't play the physical copy of the game.
Yeah.
We've talked in the past, especially the one that jumps to mind is One Deck Dungeon, or even Star Realms, where there are some games where the app almost replaces the physical game. And if given the option, you'd always want to play the app. But with Among the Stars, having watched you play it, what I found myself thinking was, well, that's really cool that he can now play Among the Stars more because it's a huge table hog and you really need to have the space for it. But, dang, now I really want to find a big table and go play a physical copy of Among the Stars. Which...
The plan is working!
There you go. I mean, I already liked the game, so it's not like it's like, I'm turned around on this. I already liked this game. But it definitely feels like the kind of app that is not going to replace the physical game.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this more in the future, but I think also what it is that obviously for screen size, you don't see everybody stationed all at the same time. So if you are strategically drafting cards to get them out of other people's stations, you've got to do a lot of tabbing back and forth. But whatever, we'll talk about that again in the future. It is time for us to go to our feature, where we are going to put the newcomer Decrypto one-on-one with the juggernaut of Codenames. As a Viking leader, I know all there is to know about runes and taking direction from the constellations. I'm not so sure about closing some weird portal, but I'm aces at taking the advantage in combat with a fearsome monster to get what I want.
In Rising 5, Runes of Asteros, you and your game group will work together to manipulate the 7 colored rune tiles to find the correct arrangement of 4 that will allow you to close the rune gate and save the planet. You'll need to take on encounters to gain the energy needed to check your arrangement and to acquire artifacts and hints to help you solve the puzzle. But watch out, if you take too long or allow too many monsters to go unvanquished, your group will find nothing but failure.
The blood moon rises once again.
The puzzle and your attempts are managed by a slick app that means all players will get to be in on the action.
A what?
So check out Rising 5, Runes of Asteros, and all the other great Grey Fox games at greyfoxgames.com. Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted.
For our feature segment today, we are doing one of our variants segments where we take 2 games we think have enough of a similar kind of aesthetic that we're able to kind of put them up one against each other to just discuss the 2. And for this one, we have chosen the recent release of Decrypto against the, 3-year-old release of Codenames. Danielle, you want to give some stats?
Sure. Decrypto is a 2018 release from Scorpion Mask and Yellow. It plays 4 to 8 players in 15 to 45 minutes. The designer is Thomas Desjardins L'Esperance, and the artists are Fabien Fulcheron, Nils, and Manuel Sanchez. This is a game of words and secretly transmitting information to your team without it getting intercepted.
Yes, Decrypto is a game all about communicating, hopefully with only your team, but then the other team is going to try to figure out what it is you're trying to communicate and swoop in and steal in dramatic fashion that particular turn or round. So, like I said, this is a team game, and each team is going to have at least 2, and probably 3, maybe 4 players on their side. They're all going to sit on the same side of the table. The whole team sits on one side of the table, as opposed to Codenames, which I guess we can talk about later. But anyway, on your side of the table, you have a stand that has 4 slots in it that, using red lens technology, reveal secret words to you from these cards. You're just basically going to slide 4 cards. Each card has a word or a pair, a phrase of words, like sandwich or shark or something like that, spy or subterfuge, or those are all S words. I don't know how I got an S train, but there we are. So on each turn of the game, one player is going to be the clue giver. They're going to draw a card off of this stack of little floppy disk shaped cards, and they're going to have a sequence of numbers on it. Maybe it's 1, 3, and 4. I'm going to look up at that shield in front of me and see, okay, 1 is sandwich, 3 is shark, and 4 is Michael Douglas, or something like that. I don't know. That's wild. But what I'm going to do is I need to communicate to my team the sequence of numbers 1, 3, 4. So maybe I'll say bread, and I'll say swimming, and then I'll say sunglasses, which is a very deep cut that will only make sense to people that have listened to the Neon album Stainless Style about the life of John DeLorean. But if you have, you just got that joke, and high five yourself for me. But I'm going to say bread, swimming, sunglasses, and then Danielle over there, who is also on my team, is going to look at that, and she's like, oh, okay, I get this. She's going to say 1, 3, 4. The other team over there is going to be like, I don't understand what that has to do with anything, but they're going to write down these words on their particular sheet. Each team has a sheet that they're going to write down all of the words communicated on each round. I think this is a really interesting way of doing this, to record the information you've got. And what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, well, we know that bread is 1, so that's easy. And I'm going to put that down to the bottom here at this column for words related to 1. And then as you go over time and people continue to give more and more clues, maybe you have bread and meat and veggies for 1. And you're just like, oh, well, obviously this is going to be some kind of a sandwich or something like that.
That is the definition of most sandwiches.
Definition of a sandwich or hot dog. But we'll move on.
No.
So what's going to happen is as a team gets more and more information about what the other team's clues are, after I say bread, swimming, and sunglasses, the other team is going to come back and be like, that's 1, 3, 2. And if you've been paying attention this far, you know that 1 and 3 were correct, but 2 was not. And I will feel very good about myself because I successfully used a clue from a 2008 electronic album about a guy who made a car. Maybe the other words that I had given for 2 were things like, I don't know, trees and sun, and people were just thinking, okay, well, that one must be something about, I don't know, being outdoors or something. Sunglasses makes perfect sense in column 2, so we'll just guess that. But what you're going to do is eventually get an idea of what the other team's words are, not specifically what their words are, but what you need to do is be able to know what the code that they're transmitting is. And that's the real catch here, is that as we play these games further and further, we're finding that you don't actually need to know the words, you just have to have an idea so you can break the code before the other team is able to transmit it. If you successfully intercept a code twice from the other team, that is a win for that particular game. And if through some, problem, your own team is not able to understand the code that you were transmitting, maybe, you're not familiar with 2008 independent records that came out on the Anticon label, then you're going to get a fail token, and 2 fail tokens also loses for you. And you're going to play this until a team wins or loses, and then probably play another round or so, because, that's how you do these kind of games. But that is how Decrypto works. So let's bring the other contender to the table. We've got Codenames Classic, the 2015 release from Czech Games Edition, 2 to 8 players, 15 minutes, designed by Vlad Vatel, with art by Stefan Gantiez and Tomáš Kušrovský. Codenames is, of course, the reigning, defending, and undisputed word game about giving all those clues to your teammates before the other team gives all of their clues to their teammates, I guess, also.
Well, I'm not sure that's a unanimous decision, but around here it certainly is, or at least it was up until this point.
Shocking spoiler. Danielle, tell us about Codenames?
It's not a shocking spoiler. Just in case you've not played Codenames, I highly recommend you do. It's a great game, but what you're going to do is lay out a grid of 25 words. There is going to be one person who is the code giver for each team, and both code givers will sit on one side of the table so that they can see a card that is going to let you know which words are meant to be given to your team. The code giver for the blue team is going to try to get their team to guess all of the words that are depicted in the card that they're looking at that are blue. The code giver for the red team is going to try to get their team to guess all of the words that are shown in red, based on this grid that they're looking at. There is also one word that is shown in black, which if either team guesses, that team loses immediately. And the clues that you're going to be giving in Codenames are going to be a word and a number. The word applies to a certain number of your clues that are shown on the card if you're the clue giver, and the number is how many of those words are applied to by this clue. So maybe there's a grid of 25 cards out and you haven't guessed any, and Jake is on my team, and I'm trying to get him to guess bat and ball and glove. This would be very good luck if all of those things were on my team, but this is an example on the fly, so let's go with it. I could say home run 3. Home run is one word, don't look at me like that.
Okay.
And he might point to those 3 things, hopefully, if he has guessed well. If he does so, I'll put our marker on top of all of the things that he has correctly guessed, and the next team will get to go. If he makes a misguess, say I say something crazy like, Marmaduke, and he doesn't get any of those 3 things or any of our words at all, I would place the correct token on top of what he does guess first, either a bystander token, which means the word applies to no one, maybe the other team's token if he guessed one of the other team's words, or that assassin token if we've immediately lost the game because he picked the word that makes us lose immediately. And then the other team would get to go. He would get no more guesses. You go back and forth until one team has guessed all of their words or somebody guesses the assassin, and the team that guesses all their words or doesn't guess the assassin wins.
And then you play a whole bunch more games because it's Codenames and that's what you do?
That is true.
Okay, so I want to start off where we usually start off on a review because I feel like this is worth talking about. Generally, we talk about presentation, components, and that kind of stuff. And I gotta say, Decrypto just rocks my world in terms of the presentation. I love the component quality. I understand, Red Lens technology is kind of a weird kind of thing to play with. And
hold on a second. For people who don't know what Red Lens technology is,
okay.
because I think we're overstating what this is, if you've ever seen those the cards that have red and blue printing on them, and you can't really read what they say if you just look at them normally, but then you put a piece of red cellophane in front of your face or red lighting gel, and you can suddenly read it. That's what Red Lens technology is. It's red cellophane.
It is definitely a technology. Thank you very much.
Okay, cool.
But
letting everybody know.
You're sliding the cards into this thing, and you've got this nice little standee board in front of you. I love the way that the particular cards look because you have your little floppy disks, and each team is different. The white team and the black team have different looking cards, and I appreciated that amount of detail to it. I think that there's, a good number of cards in both of these for words. The ones for Codenames are double-sided, so you get 2 words per card. The ones for Decrypto actually have 4 words because with Red Lens technology, one side of the card is facing up or one side of the card is facing down, so you only see a quarter of the card at any given time in the particular stand that you've got. Other than that, it's really just cardboard punch boards and stuff like that, but I really love the aesthetic of Decrypto. I think it looks cool on the table. I love having the kind of the dueling computer server racks, kind of like one team's got an Enigma machine and the other one's got the other machine or something, because the backs of the giant stand, or not the giant, the backs of the standee boards have a nice graphic design to them. It looks more exciting to me on the table than Codenames.
Okay, I will say one thing you didn't touch on is the art is kind of cute in Decrypto. They have these little this cartoon computer character that is on all the tokens and is sort of a fun little mascot for the game. I will say we have already found at least one misspelling on one of the words in Decrypto. You were telling me earlier that there were misspellings in the original Codenames as well. It's 3 years ago. I can't really remember as much as I can remember games we've played in the last couple of weeks. So that's something to keep in mind. They're not egregious, like it was an E missing off the end of disease.
Yes.
So you're probably going to be able to figure out what the word is supposed to be. If not, you've got several other ones, just switch it out. So that is a little bit of a production beef, I guess I have, but it's not the end of the world.
One thing that I really appreciate about Decrypto, and I think that this will kind of lead into what I would say about learning and teaching the game, Decrypto has a very fun tutorial video that when you just, watch it straight up, it's very retro, it's very kind of 8-bit kind of feel to it, but I feel it does a good job teaching the game, which is good because it is much harder to teach Decrypto, or at least talk about Decrypto, than it is to show somebody how Codenames works. Codenames has always had a benefit to me in that you can plop down Codenames between 2 people that have never played games before and they can get an idea of what they're supposed to do with it. Decrypto, you have to kind of see how it plays to understand how it plays.
Yeah, and even knowing how it plays, sometimes using the sheets that you need to do to keep track of all the information isn't 100% clear, even from that cool little video. Like, the sheets have a side for both teams when you get them, so you're supposed to be writing down the clues that are given for both teams and grouping them into which number they go with, because you're not supposed to repeat clues for your own team, and you want to make sure that you are grouping the words for the other team so that you can try to figure out what they're guessing around. But it's not really abundantly clear that you're supposed to write the clues down in both places for both teams. And there are 2 little sets of checkboxes that you're supposed to write, like what the other team guessed or whether or not you got them correct. It's just not immediately clear how that particular form works. Once you know how it works, it works very well. And it gives you all the information you need, and it's really useful once you know it, but it is a little bit harder to get into and understand how it works.
Yeah, and I feel like that's where I'm going to end up on Decrypto. Decrypto is a steeper learning curve, and there's more things you have to keep track of and more things you have to manage with that sheet. I think with Codenames, again, the joy of Codenames is simplicity and the ease of play, and I feel like Decrypto is not the kind of game that I would bring out to new to hobby gaming or new to word games kind of players. I want to play this with people that at least have worked together in team play games before in the past and understand how to communicate and so on and so forth.
Now, player count is something that I think that these two are slightly different on as well. With Decrypto, you're best off with an even number of players so that you can have even teams, and you're really sort of capped, if you really want to play this game well, at 8, maybe 10 players. because if you get more than that, the teams are going to get a little bit unwieldy, and you're not going to be able to come to sort of an agreement on your guess relatively quickly, because you do have to come up with your number guess for each of them before the round can move on. Whereas I feel like in Codenames, that sort of pack mentality works a little bit better. Codenames works great with a big group of people because it gets more brains thinking about what something could be on the table. And I think what that actually comes down to is the question of where the ambiguity is in either of these games. In Codenames, the clue giver has to pull from all of the possible words in the world to present to their team something that goes with a set group of choices which are shown on the table. The team can never point to anything that isn't in that grid of 25 cards. And once you start covering things up, that choice gets smaller and smaller. So the ambiguity is on the side before the game starts to play. And I think that works better with a big group of people because you're really only trying to connect what you've received to what's in front of you. With Decrypto, the ambiguity when you're trying to crack the code is on the guessing team because you've been given a set of clues. Now you have every word that's possible in essentially the English language and the slightly misspelled English language to figure out what they might be alluding to. There's no set that you're trying to pull from. And I feel like with a bigger group, that could be a little bit of a more problematic ambiguity than Codenames has, if that makes any sense.
No, it does make a lot of sense, and I don't think I would play Decrypto with more than 8. Like, I don't even want to do 10, and I feel like that's due to the two other things that make Decrypto unique to me. First of all, again, in Codenames, you can't intercept the other team so much, other than like, oh, you know, we're obviously that was supposed to be for us, not for you, so kind of stuff. But in Decrypto, a larger group is a hindrance because you can't openly communicate and talk about what you think the code might mean. And that's going to be a bigger struggle because, you know, I've had this in a few games where I have 3 players trying to guess the clue together, and we're kind of just like looking at the sheet, and we're looking at it could be like tap, 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 could be this, maybe it's this one, and like drawing like a line from spot A to spot B on our sheet to not give away information to the other team. The other reason I would never play Decrypto with more than 8 is the other part that I didn't mention in the talk through is that each turn of Decrypto, the person giving the code changes. This is the thing that honestly I think is what makes me enjoy Decrypto so much in that 4 to 8 player range is that everybody gets a turn to be the code giver. This is a thing that I've always thought about with Codenames. It can be kind of fun in a way to be the code giver, the code giver because you're working on a language the whole time. You're talking about those words and you're building off of past knowledge. But it can also be a really isolating experience if you are the code giver. And then you also have the very large group problem that is, if I am the code giver and I have 6 teammates over there, they might not be paying attention for a good bit of the time. Just because you have that many people, they're going to be talking about whatever. With Decrypto, with a rotating code giver, I feel like everybody is going to stay more engaged in what we're talking about in this particular set of words.
Okay. I understand what you're saying, but I don't feel the same way about the code giver role in Codenames. And that is purely just a personal opinion. I feel like when I'm the code giver in Codenames, it is sort of me and the other code giver laughing at everybody who's trying to guess.
Okay.
Because you're both looking at the same card, and the only other person playing the game who knows what I probably meant by giving the clue that I just gave is the other person who's giving the clues for the other team. And they can't say anything about it, but, you know, you can sort of maybe like point out and, you know, somebody gives a good clue and they're like, oh yeah, I get it. Mm-hmm. And that feels really good as the code giver. And at the same time, it doesn't feel like I'm just me sitting by myself. It's me and this other person who's in the same boat that I am. So that's just my personal feeling when we play Codenames with our group.
No, I definitely feel that. And I've had any number of those moments where, you know, I'm sitting with, like, generally it's like me and Dan as code givers. And you just look at him and he looks at me and we're just like, oh, God. These teammates just don't understand the trouble of being a code giver. I think the thing that I really like about the way that the rotating clue giver works in Decrypto is that it also really fosters the team feeling more. Like in the example you just said, Dan and I are kind of feeling like we're on the same side in a way, and that we're both, we're sending our in-jokes between each other. But in Decrypto, I feel like I get to form my team, and my team works together as a whole, knowing fully well that the other team is working on something different.
I agree. I think it may just have to do with the way that our group dynamic usually works when we play these type of games, which is that our group is sort of, when we're playing either of these games, just a big group that is playing a game together. It's less a team versus team, like hard competition dynamic, and it's more everybody's having a fun, good time together. So it all does feel like one team, and I guess that's what I like about Codenames, is that it can all just feel like we're all playing together, and yeah, we have a different clue to work off of, but that's really all just in one big experience, which Decrypto is very much more, this is my team and this is your team and you're doing a different thing.
Maybe that's kind of just what I've been craving, though. I want to have a word deduction kind of style game that does a good job with the team mechanic. Like you said, Codenames becomes one big experience, and I really want it to be a team game more, and Decrypto really fits that niche for me. I love the way that the rotating clue giver makes everybody have a chance at communicating, and I love the way that fosters a different kind of communication, and we can just go back and forth about this again and again.
Yeah, it's just a difference of opinion. One thing I will say is that if you have somebody who is not comfortable being the clue giver, and we have had a couple of people that we've played either of these games with that just don't want to be the clue giver, that either feel put on the spot, or if you have somebody who is not necessarily English as a first language, Decrypto may be a little bit more difficult for them because everybody does have to be the clue giver.
Okay.
So if you have a group with somebody who is particularly shy or is not particularly fluent, that may weigh in on which of these two games you want to play.
I want to say one more thing about clue giving, and this is an important distinction that I also didn't kind of cover in the rules overview for either. In Codenames, it's very clear that your clue must be one word, or one proper noun, I guess, and a number. In Decrypto, your clue can be whatever you want. It doesn't have to be just a word, it can be a phrase, it can be noises, or you can even do charades if you want. The rules tell you that all of those things are acceptable, with the full knowledge that whatever you do for your clue might be something that gives the other team more info. And weirdly enough, it's never really come up more than just a word or a phrase for anybody's clues in Decrypto so far, and I think a lot of that is just that we're so used to the Codenames one-word kind of clue that we haven't really tried some more fun clues with Decrypto, but I'm kind of hoping that we do get to that point eventually, and I'd like to see how that game functions with more off-the-wall kind of clue giving. Would it make it easier? Would it make it harder? Is it going to be basically the same? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go into too much depth, because if you give away that much information, the other team is going to guess very easily if you like went on a diatribe about your clue. But I do think that there is more opportunity for variance in what you're saying in Decrypto.
So that pretty much wraps up the discussion there. They're both pretty much exactly the same price. I think they're both 20 or sub 20, and you can find them wherever you want. And it might be the kind of thing, if you've played a whole bunch of Codenames, maybe Decrypto is the next game you look at. For my money, Decrypto is the first word deduction team game that I have played that's gotten me as excited as when I first played Codenames. There's been a whole bunch of others in the meantime that are kind of, trying to do that we're the Codenames killer kind of thing, but Decrypto is the first one that's really gotten me excited about it. And I would personally pretty much play it any time over Codenames in that 4 to 8 player range.
I would have to disagree with you on that. I agree it is a good game, and it does bring up a lot of the same feeling and sort of challenge that idea of what word game are we going to play now in a team setting. But I think I would still go with classic Codenames over Decrypto in almost any situation. Now, there may be specific times where, somebody just doesn't like Codenames, or, I have some other reason to play Decrypto, but if all other things being even, I think I would pick Codenames Classic.
Well, there it is. Let's take a quick break and come back and put Decrypto on tap. How about that? For more information on the beers we chose for today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. So, as we usually do at this point in the show, we are going to give you some beer pairings for a game. And in case you forgot from 15-20 minutes ago, we are going to be talking about Decrypto, the 2018 release from Scorpion Mask and Yellow, blah, 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 4 to 8 players, so on and so forth. You can go into, how did you get here if you didn't know that part already? Anyway, Danielle, would you like to lead us off with one of the beers?
Okay. First off, from Ohana Brewing Company in Los Angeles, California, we have Encrypted Data IPA. This is an American IPA that comes in at 7.6% ABV. It has citrusy fruit flavors and a noticeable malty backbone. This is a rotating seasonal that is currently on tap in their tap room, so if you are in the Los Angeles area, you can go and check it out.
Next up, from the Dayton Beer Company in Dayton, Ohio. Their slogan is Think Dayton, Drink Dayton.
I just like that too much. I don't know why I put it in the notes, but I liked it.
We have an Imperial IPA named Codebreaker, 10.2% ABV, 98 IBU, so this is going to pack quite a walloping. But it is a smooth double IPA with a mix of citrus and piney hops and a toasted malt flavor. Now, this is a seasonal, but the season is April through December, and I don't think that's still a seasonal. That's a 3 seasonal, and yes, it's on now and through the rest of the year, apparently.
Third up, we have from Twisted Pine Brewing Company in Boulder, Colorado, Intercept. This is another IPA. It's an American IPA that comes in at 7.4% ABV and 85 IBU. It has a strongly tropical flavor that has citrus and melon notes. It is there now, and it is apparently also in 22-ounce bottles, although I cannot tell if the bottles are currently for sale.
Okay.
If you know anything about Twisted Pine, this is not the beer that they are known for. They are known for their chili beers. They make Billy's Chilies and Ghostface Killa, which is a ghost pepper beer, which is really amazing to watch people who don't know what it is try and drink. But Intercept, which is their American IPA with the nice citrus flavors, works for Decrypto and is also probably significantly more tolerable to most people.
I did not make that connection, but yes, it will be much more palatable. Oh dear, Ghostface Killa is not a beer I want.
No, but it is a really fun beer to watch people who think that they are the biggest, baddest dudes that ever walked Dude Earth try and open up, and you warn them. You're like, that is going to be hotter than you think it's going to be. And inevitably they brush you off and be like, no, we got this. And then 5 minutes later you watch them run to the bathroom or for a glass of water or something and just laugh incessantly. It's a good time.
And then Danielle finishes her own bottle of Ghostface Killa instead.
Occasionally, from time to time. I'm a hot food fanatic, so I've had a bottle or two of that stuff.
All right, next up, Bunker Brewing Company in Portland, Maine. Scythe. It's an India Pale Lager, 6.4% ABV, dank resinous lager with Eureka hops. This is a rotating availability. It's on draft and in 12-ounce cans.
And finally, from New Glarus Brewing Company in New Glarus, Wisconsin, we have Enigma Sour Ale. This is a 5.5% ABV, 12 IBU sour ale that has malted barley and cherries and is aged in unlined oak casks. I happen to have one as my show beer, and it is as amazing as I remembered it. So if you get a chance to try this one, I highly recommend it. It is part of their Thumbprint series, so they brew it pretty much whenever they dang want. They say that they make no guarantees that it will ever come back because Thumbprint beers are sort of their one-off, unique things for them, but they have brewed it 8 times over the last, 12 years, so they brew it fairly regularly. There are 12-ounce bottles that it is bottled in, and it looks like you can get it right now.
Cool. Well, if you would like information on any of those beers, they will be in the show notes section of our website, draftmechanic.net, so you can go over there, click, 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 and suddenly you have information. That sounds like a good idea and a good deal. So, for today's beer segment, we are taking a look back all the way back to the 3rd of May, because we just had the World Beer Cup happen in Nashville, Tennessee, and we have some results in front of us to talk about who are the winners of the golds, silver, and bronze in a whole bunch of categories.
The World Beer Cup happens every 2 years, so this would be the first time in 2 years that we have these results. And I did want to talk about the increases that we've seen in the last 2 years first. There were 8,234 beers entered in the 2018 World Beer Cup. That is up almost 2,000 beers from 2 years ago when 6,596 beers were entered.
Whoa.
And it's not just the same breweries putting in more and more beers. There are there's more than 600 more new breweries that had entered this year than in the previous World Beer Cup. That's 2,515, up from 1,907.
That's huge. That's an insane amount of growth in 2 years.
I mean, yeah, that's essentially adding on another quarter.
Mm-hmm.
We have 66 countries represented in these submissions, which is up from 55. And there are 101 beer styles, which is up from 96 in 2016.
Ooh, we've invented new beers.
well, we've at least talked about new beers. Because obviously the categories in the World Beer Cup isn't us necessarily inventing new styles of beer, although there are styles of beer that are evolving and changing all the time.
Yeah.
It's people really embracing styles and having enough beers in a category that they're willing to delve into that category and select the best of them to judge. Because, I mean, if you only have one or two breweries making a style of beer, or, you know, even if you have a generous handful, but they're not all going to submit, you don't want to have a category for that because there's not really going to be enough to draw from. One thing I do want to point out is that the World Beer Cup reserves the right to not award a medal if they don't think that there is something that meets the gold, silver, or bronze standard in a particular category. This year there was only one category that I was able to find that was missing an award. They did not award a gold award in the category of International Style Pilsner.
Huh.
There were 64 entries, and there was a silver and bronze awarded.
Okay.
I think in 2016 they didn't award a gold for pumpkin, but that might be the Great American Beer Festival that I'm thinking of.
Yeah. I feel like every one of these, we do have one of those categories that does not get a gold, and I've actually seen, I think, not a bronze as well.
As far as the judges go, there were 295 judges this year, which is up about 40 from 2016. There were 253 in 2016, and they were from 33 countries as opposed to 31. Now, another interesting piece of information about the people who are judging this is that the World Beer Cup really does pull from the world. 72% of the judges came from outside the United States where the awards were held, obviously leaving only 28% of the judges to come from inside the United States because that's how subtraction works.
Interesting math.
No, it's pretty standard
I
math.
find most math interesting. Numbers are good.
Now, breweries in 15 countries actually received medaled. I had mentioned that 66 countries had entered, but obviously not everybody who enters wins. 15 different countries were represented in the winners, and the actual percentage-wise winningest country was Panama. They entered 9 beers, and only one of them won, but that's still 11% of the beers that they entered. Belgium was the next most winning. They entered 70 beers, and 7 of them were winners, which is a 10% win rating, obviously. And that's unsurprising. A lot of these styles are Belgian styles, so you would think that they would be pretty good at making their own styles of beer.
I would hope so.
Following down in the list of winningest countries, you've got Taiwan, who entered 36 beers, and 2 of those beers were winners. That's a 6% winning rate. Then you go to the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Finland, the United States, which is only a 4% win rate, but that's because 5,814 beers were entered and 242 beers were winners. So, I mean, you've got the majority of beers that were entered coming from the United States. Obviously, that's where the awards are held, so that's unsurprising in that standpoint. But it shows that if you enter a lot of beers, that doesn't mean you're going to be the winningest country, because they've only got a 4% rate. We've only got a 4% rate. Following up from them are Canada, Germany, Mexico, Italy, France, Brazil, Australia, and Japan has a 1% win rate with 151 beers entered and 2 winners. If you talk about the average number of beers that were entered in a category, there were 82 beers average entered in a category, which is up from 2016 when the average number of beers entered was 69. The 4 most entered categories this year were obviously American Style IPA. This is always the most entered category in these types of competitions. World Beer Cup and Great American Beer Festival. It doesn't matter. IPA is always going to be the one that has the most entries. That category has 377 entries. The second most entered category is actually a tie, and these 2 categories each had 196 entries. So you're talking almost 200 less entries in the second category. The 2 tied categories there are Imperial IPA, so double IPAs, and Wood and Barrel Aged Strong Beer. The third place entry is 190 beers were entered in the Wood and Barrel Aged Strong Stout category, so fairly similar to that second place category that was tied for second number of entries. You've got Wood Barrel Aged Strong Beer, and then Wood Barrel Aged Strong Stout is the third tier. In looking through the actual winners, there were a couple of things that just sort of jumped out to me as amusing. These probably aren't the most important things about the winners, but they're the ones that jumped out to me. For instance, if you wanted to get a fruit wheat beer, the top 2 beers were actually won by breweries that are owned by AB InBev, which kind of made sense to me because they're really marketable types of beers. Stuff like Shock Top is really easy to sell to people who may or may not usually consume craft beer. This is not to say that they are not really craft-sounding brand names, and it sort of jumped out to me. That is from Golden Road Brewing and 10 Barrel Brewing Company. Also, if you happen to want an American-style lager or American-style cream ale, Pabst is your place to go. They are the gold and silver medal winner, the silver medal being Pabst Blue Ribbon, so I guess it's not so blue as they thought.
I guess blue is for second place now.
There you go.
What was the first place?
It was Old Style Lager from Pabst Brewing Company.
There we go.
Now, to move away from the AB InBev train, I had mentioned there was only one category in which an award was not given, and that was the gold medal in International Style Pilsner. I also thought it was kind of funny that if you were looking for the Belgian and French style ale, this is category 62, Belgian and French style ale, apparently the place you want to go is the Great Lakes region, because all three winners were from Illinois or Michigan, so in that general Great Lakes region. Also, if you'd like an English-style India Pale Ale, apparently you want to go to Portland, because all three winners were from Portland, Oregon in that category, as opposed to Portland, Maine, which we talked about in our On Tap.
Portland, meh.
Finally, I wanted to point out a couple of breweries that are personally important to us at the show that were able to win awards, and I just, kind of wanted to point them out because we get to.
Yay.
Asheville Brewing Company's Ninja Porter took home a bronze for Brown Porter. Slanta from Legion in Charlotte, which is just local to us, took home the silver medal for Classic Irish-style Dry Stout, which is super exciting to me because I love an Irish Dry Stout. Taft's Ale House in Cincinnati, which is our stop every year on the way back from Gen Con, and we are absolutely just in love with not only their beer, but their food, took home a silver medal for their Gustav, which is a Vienna-style lager.
Oh.
And Fiction Beer Company in Denver, Colorado, which I know we've mentioned in a couple of our on-taps, but is also frequented by fellow Punchboard Media members, the Mile High Game Guys, took home a silver medal in Dark Lager for their alternate present.
Hooray.
So those were just some things that I had noticed when I was skimming through, and I wanted to be like, hey, y'all, good job.
Ta-da!
If you are looking for any more of information on the World Beer Cup, I will be linking to a PDF of all of the winners, which will print very small if you happen to print it out. And also you can I'll link also to the HTML sortable, very cool database that they have that you can search all the winners from all of the years of the World Beer Cup. And it is a cool website I like to play around on sometimes.
Well, congratulations to the 5 North Carolina breweries that brought a medal home. Hopefully we get a chance to drink your beers soon. Now it's time for us to move on to the final round.
This is it. This is the answer. It says that a bolt of lightning is going to strike the draftmechanic.net at precisely 10:04 p.m. next Saturday night.
In our final round segment today, we have asked our Slack channel, with the announcement of My Little Scythe, alongside titles like Ticket to Ride First Journey or Evolution the Beginning, there's sure to be an influx of popular games reworked for kids. What game do you want to see kidified, and how would you do it? If you are interested, by the way, this is not part of the question, but if you are interested, by the way, in contributing into one of our final round topics, come and join the Draft Mechanic Slack channel. It's draftmechanic.net/Slack. It's free to join. You can go do the thing, you can talk with us, and you can do, well, I guess actually just that one thing. You can talk. And,
you can make us read your opinion at the end.
For example, BJ from Board Game Gumbo has said these words: Scooby-Doo Spectacular. It's Battlestar Galactica reimagined, where those meddling kids are on another mission, this time to eat beignets and solve a mystery down in New Orleans. Scooby-Doo's cousin Scooby-Doo owns a big mansion on Magazine Street that is haunted. Woo! The gang investigates, but in the process reveals a secret they have never known. One of the gang is actually a ghost. Solve the mystery and defeat the bad guys before the ghost betrays the mission, or else never see another Scooby snack again. Now, I asked BJ, how would a hidden traitor work for a kids game? And he said, kids love ghosts. Throw in hidden cards where they try to figure out the mystery. Some of the cards will sabotage the outcome. Battlestar Galactica as a kids game could work if shorter and easier. Patrick Hillier commented on that too. He said, I always thought that Betrayal at House on the Hill should be redone as Scooby-Doo. I'm pretty sure there are some unofficial versions of this done already out there in the world.
Paul Imbeden from Split Second Games suggested Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective as Encyclopedia Brown, and Will Foy chimed in, +1 for the Encyclopedia Brown, maybe with some girl power too, like Nancy Drew, or like, heck, Nancy Drew and Encyclopedia Brown, Consulting Detectives, sounds fun. I would like to +2 that Encyclopedia Brown thing because I was obsessed with Encyclopedia Brown as a kid. So I think a consulting detective mystery that was based in the Encyclopedia Brown lore would be super cool.
I think that's a really awesome idea. And even if they couldn't get the license for it, I mean, there's no reason they couldn't just do young Sherlock Holmes. I'm surprised, honestly, that this isn't the kind of thing that has been done yet.
No. It needs to be Encyclopedia Brown. And do you think people are chomping at the bit for the Encyclopedia Brown license? I think they could probably do it.
Very well.
Paul also chimed back in to say, Pandemic Cooties, Lemonade Stand Magnate, or The Gallerists, but it's kids' art, and each player has a gallery on the refrigerator. Jake suggested maybe The Crayonist?
Yes. Patrick, the other Patrick in our Slack, not Patrick Hillier, said, I feel like Juice Crafters, a reworking of Brew Crafters for kids, would be amazing. Send your workers out to get different fruits from the market, then juice them into different juice blends and sell for money. And I said, well, instead of brew pubs, you can just have sidewalk juice stands. And that sounds delicious because I really like juice.
This sounds a lot like it could be transitioned also into that lemonade stand magnate that Paul was talking about.
Yes.
Finally, Dennis Hoyle from Bellwether Games says, waiting on pins and needles for My Little Blood Rage, which obviously that's going to need a little bit of a thematic reworking. Or maybe not. Maybe we need to get the Viking leader from the Grey Fox Games ads in there.
There you go. Viking leader. I am at your service. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the episode today. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Draft Mechanic. You can find us on the internet at draftmechanic.net or at draftmechanic on all your favorite social medias of Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We're all in those places.
We've also got a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470. So if you want to check out the thread for this episode and let us know what you think on what we've been talking about, that is the place to do it. If you are in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, on Tuesday, May 15th, we will be having our meetup at Salud Cerveceria. We'd love for you to come out and play some games, have a great time.
Also, once again, if you are going to Geekway to the West this year, say hi, send me a tweet, send Danielle a tweet, send us all tweets, tweet at everybody, and you can also come hang out with us during the convention at the Urban Chestnut Brewing Company location at the Grove on Friday, May 18th. We'll get there at 11, probably stay just through after lunch at 11 a.m., not 11 p.m., so 11 to 4 p.m.-ish. There is a Facebook event page. If you go to draftmechanic.net/events, I believe will get you there, or go to our Facebook page and click events. You can do that thing too.
I think we're giving out a special dispensation for drinking at 11 a.m. for this one, right?
Yeah. Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Grey Fox Games. Visit greyfoxgames.com and sign up for their newsletter for the latest. Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you so much for putting up with the 1 week delay to get this episode done. It was pretty necessary, but we will be back to our schedule, our regular schedule next week. We will be releasing episode 75, our recorded live at Geekway to the West episode with some friends probably, next Monday on the feed on the regular schedule, so we will see you there. Danielle, I think I've covered everything, but I feel like I'm forgetting something. Do you know what it is?
As always, I would like to remind our listeners to please game responsibly and tell them that I'll see them back here in 1 week for another round.
Sounds like a plan. Good night.
Night.
Draft Mechanic episode 74 is recorded on Sunday, May 13th, 2018, in front of a live and hungry Studio Cat.
Beauty is in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter.
Hey out there in podcast land, this is Brian, and I just wanted to invite you to check out my tabletop game review and preview video channel, Cloak and Meeple. There, I check out a lot of Kickstarter games, as well as sneak in some fresh reviews of published games. Come and check out all of the bad acting in my attempts to be entertaining in my intros. Stay for a game overview and hear my thoughts of the game at the very end. You can find Cloak and Meeple on YouTube at youtube.com/cloakandmeeple.
Punchboard Media, where we all
bring something
to the table.
Pull up a chair
at punchboardmedia.com.